They say love makes the world go round, and everybody loves love. We have love poetry, we have love movies, love songs, and today we're going to talk about a love novel, American Hearts, a particularly American love story. And our guest today is Ed Vogt. Ed, what makes a love story American? Do the Italians have a different approach? Do the Greeks have a different approach?
Well, Ron, only an American could have written American Hearts. That's my thesis. And the reason is that America is an unusual country. And the people in America, when they fall in love, or when we look at them and say they're in love, we're actually talking about a different animal than if you talked about Italians being in love.
What makes it different?
I have several scenes, several hundred really, in this book, American Hearts, that shows you why Americans are different. One thing, for example, let's just take an example of the man who repairs shoes. And that scene, you walk into his place and you say, will you fix my boots? And the guy says, sure. And he fixes them, doesn't charge anything because it's just a minute or two of work. And then you say, well, how much? Oh, he says, $2. So that's nice. It's a country guy. And then he says, will you shine them up for me too? And he says, no. He says, what do you mean you won't shine them? He said, my grandpappy told me years ago, they laugh at us country folk and they say that, we don't shine our boots. And that's true, mister, but I'll tell you what, we don't shine other people's boots either.
And this is an American phenomenon?
This is an American individualistic phenomenon.
And where does it come from?
It comes from the fact that we inhabit a country from the very beginning, which was uninhabited, in our opinion, except for the Indians, right? And that's just like uninhabited compared to Europe, where everybody owns something. You turn around and you're running into somebody. America is individualistic because we have room for individualism.
And that follows into the realm of love as well?
Yes.
How?
It's hard for us to be in love.
Wait a minute.
Yep.
It seems to me there's a lot of love going on out there.
No, there's a lot of emotion that pretends to be love, but actually caring for other people, we're not good as a nation.
But is this, are we talking about 200 years of being removed and selfish and unkind?
No, actually we're individualistic. In fact, the word individualism was created for our country by a Frenchman, Alex de Tocqueville. When he came here visiting America about 1840 or so, he looked around and he said, individualisme. And we said, what the hell are you talking, French or something? And he said, it means individualism. Oh, we said, oh, why don't you talk like we do then, But the point is, individualism comes from observing Americans. We're individualistic. We go out to conquer the world. You don't go conquering places in Europe because somebody else owns it. So individualism is a very big plus for Americans. We don't take a lot of guff from anybody. We stand off from Europe. But we pay a price for that individualism, and that is loneliness, sorrow, violence, all that's in here in American Hearts.
Are you saying that the characters are a little private, a little unkind to one another? Are they remote when it comes to love expressions?
Well, you have to see how they act toward each other in this book. There's some interesting characters in here that you'll never meet in real life. And that's the important point of having a novel. You meet people like a Hamlet or someone. You'll never meet Hamlet walking down the street. But you're poorer for not having met Hamlet. So if you want to see how American individualism plays out with people back and forth, you can read American Hearts.
Okay, give us an overview without giving away the story. Who are these people? What's loving about them, and how do you know them?
Well, I've taught college and I've done law work and all that, but why these people are typically American, I leave to the reader to decide.
But you're planting some seeds, I would guess.
Well, I'm putting a story about, you see how individualism gets in the way of happiness. You talk to Americans and you say, wait a minute, get out there, be an individual. Your dad and I are tired of taking care of you, get out, get a job. Then we say, good for you, good for you. Say, yeah, but we weren't evolved that way. We evolved with family. And American individualism goes against our native instincts of having people around us and caring about them.
Well, can we overcome that?
We can if
and
we recognize.
And should we?
Well, look at the newspaper every day. Who's killing who? We got teenagers, and you think they come from normal families? No, not really. And they're killing people. Go around the world and see if you find teenagers killing people taking their gun to school. No, in America, because our family structure is very weak. And that's the negative of individualism.
So, will we learn about that in this book, American Hearts? Will we see these characters living this kind of remote, cold life, or what are we going to find?
You'll see what happens to a guy who's the protagonist in this book, Ted Dalton. And he leaves his law practice. He doesn't like law particularly, and he goes to teach college. And he meets these students, Ted and Andrea, two of the ones in his class, in business law class he teaches. And these people sense that this man's hurting. His wife has just died. He's newly married. She's just died, and now he doesn't talk to people. He does what John Wayne does, goes off on his own and isolates himself. Isolation is the number one problem of America. Isolation and broken families, they go together. And then violence comes from all that. So he goes down there, and they sense that he's hurting, and they try to bring him out of his shell a little bit in their way. He meets them, and we see how he acts with them, and we see how he acts with other people. And it gives you an idea of what can cure loneliness, what can cure depression. And you tell me, I don't know, this is based on a true story, which means nothing, really. This is based on true fiction.
True fiction.
Yeah.
Now, you know a little bit about this. You've taught law, I understand?
Yes.
At Berkeley?
I taught economics, political science, and some law, all at Berkeley.
Did you do it lovingly?
I did it with great love.
And care for the
That's
students?
got me in trouble. No. You see Ted in his classes here. He brings up interesting points, things that most people don't think of, and the students don't like it. He says
They don't like him when he does it?
they think it's off the subject. He'll say, "Listen, we don't have our textbooks yet. They didn't bring them in at the bookstore. Let's do some thinking about law." And they say, "I don't want to do that." He says, "Why do judges wear robes?" And what do you mean, why? They keep them warm, and they go through that question. And then later on, the next class, we talked about why judges wear robes. Now let me ask you a question, another one. If you saw a goldfish swimming in the water, and you said to the goldfish, "Hey, how's the water?" The goldfish would say, "What water?"
Ah.
And the class says, "Oh, what is this? What do you think?" And he'll ask different people in the class. And he brings out what they call it the Socratic method. That's the way he was taught law. He tries to bring out truth by asking questions. So they play with that and try to figure out, what's a goldfish? He can't say anything, and they get very literal about it. So when you read American Hearts, you learn about more than love. I mean, who cares about love?
Well,
in the fundamental sense.
maybe a lot.
Well, I know, but people think that's going to be romance.
Ah, what's the difference?
Love lasts.
And romance?
You outgrow romance.
Uh-huh.
Romance is just nature's way of getting us to have more kids. Yeah, but that's what we think love is. We think it's flowers and rings and all that stuff, I saw an interview one time, a guy was interviewing people about Americans. And he said, "What about Americans? They don't bring flowers to the girls enough. They don't give them rings and all that." And he said, "Well, that's right. We don't do that, but we actually ask the opinion of our women. We care what they think about things." And the guy said, "Well, Frenchmen may bring champagne and Italians bow from the ankles to people, but do they care about what the women think? Usually they don't."
Ah, is that a generalization, or have you had firsthand knowledge of that?
We live life by generalization.
Okay. Generally speaking?
Generally speaking, men care more about what women think than any other country in the world. And if I'm wrong,
did you hear that?
You tell me another country where women have more rights and fewer duties than in the United States.
So you're making a political statement as well.
No, I'm saying it comes out of here.
Uh-huh.
And you just infuriated me, so that's why I brought it up.
So the protagonist, how did he come with these views that were not well accepted by classmates and friends? Did he intuitively get it? Did he have a happy family? Where does his evolution, where did he come from?
We don't know. He doesn't say things like that. He would be uncomfortable with that. These things that I'm telling you right now about how Americans are not really spoken in the novel. But see if they don't come out. There's one guy in here, his name is Slater. And he's a snarling kind of independent guy. And they ask him questions. And some girl in the class says, "Women are really treated terribly. No. He says, what are you talking about? Women treated terribly? American women are the most pampered women in the world. She says, you're a fascist pig. And they go back and forth. One of the nice things
I think I saw that on TV the other night.
Yeah. One of the things about this book is that you see a lot of questions asked and a lot of people going back and forth like college students are supposed to do.
And they're not?
And they're not. Today they're just indoctrinated, really.
How do you know that?
I've seen them. I've been there.
You've been teaching
I've been
them.
in class, yes. I've taught them. I used to tell my class at Berkeley, I said, you say that businessmen are backward people and they all know one thing and one thing only, business. I said, listen, I'll tell you something about businessmen. I could have you guys stand up in class and I could tell every one of you what you believe politically. And you can't say that about businessmen. If you had a class of business people having a...
And you've actually done this?
No.
Oh, but you could?
I've seen them, sure.
Okay.
And you'd say, what do you feel about X, Y, Z? They'd all have a different opinion, but not here at Berkeley, and not in the 60s and 70s when I taught at Berkeley. Yeah, I mean, they had one view of everything. And the polls have all shown the same thing. They say that something like 95% of the faculty of our universities, what do? They're all voting left-wing or Democrat, all to the left of the political spectrum.
Have you a page or a paragraph you might illustrate some of this to the viewers?
Well, I've got some...
I mean, we've heard from you. Let's hear from Ted,
Shut up,
the protagonist.
All right, I'll shut up.
Okay, give us an example of the thinking of the book is American Hearts, a particularly American love story. 435 interesting, fascinating pages.
That's another good thing about this book. There's a lot of it. You come home from a tired day, kissing up to the boss, whoever that is.
That's a love part. Isn't that a part of the romance?
That's part of love. That's
part of love,
that's
okay.
Corporate love. Licking his boots. And you say, I want to get back to college. You turn to American Hearts and you'll see different scenes here that are funny. There's a lot of funny stuff in there.
Because they're true?
Oh, well, yeah. They're true and they're really good fiction.
Give us an example. Not to run more than about 10, 20 minutes.
Well, let's take, for example, Ted comes in class, he's talking up ahead of the textbooks have not come yet, and he'll say, he'll pick up a person's cell phone, and he'll say, excuse me, can I use this a minute? And the student says, and he says, let's sell this phone, and let's give the money to all of us. How many want to vote for that? It's a democracy, isn't it? Yeah? All right, let's have a vote. Everybody votes. Let's do that, except the one guy whose phone is there on the desk. And they says, how many against? And he puts his hand up like this, One guy's against it because it's his phone that you're going to be selling. Well, that tells you something. It doesn't say that democracy can be tyrannical. It can be, If democracy is not run by a rule of law, it's just another form of tyranny. In the old days, they'd ask Dr. Johnson of England, 1770 or so, they said, what kind of form of government is best? And he says, I don't care what form of government it is. It could be royalty, it could be anything, but just leave me alone. Yeah.
Very good.
How close is that?
That holds water even today, doesn't it?
That's what our founders thought. They said, we want a government that can't do much.
Give us a little example.
Well, here's another thing. Ted asks, why do boxing referees wear bow ties?
I've wondered that forever.
Well, doesn't everybody?
Well, maybe never.
Well, the thing is, we don't know why. But why actually we do. If you think about it, and Ted won't give them answers. They get annoyed at that. What do you mean? What's the answer? But if you ask my opinion why they wear bow ties, well, then why do they wear a tie at all? To show that there's a social presence in that ring. Otherwise, these boxers will kill each other. I mean, look, these guys could kill the ref with one punch, and they could kill each other with one punch because they're always moving. They never get hit quite flush, and, that could kill them, really. So that tie says, I am society. And he says, yeah, but why a bow tie? And no one in the class knows. And then finally the kid goes, that's easy, Professor Dalton. He says, yeah, what is the answer? He says, it's because that big tie's getting in the way of everything. He's jumping around the ring. That's why he wears the bow tie. And you know what? I think that's right.
Makes a lot of sense,
Why
doesn't
would you? He says the same reason the judge wears a robe. It shows who's ahead. Yeah, but there's violence in the courtroom? Oh, yes. If anybody here has ever been seeing two people, let's say domestic problems, and they're husband and wife trouble. They shot him in the courthouse here in Martinez a few years ago. A guy shot the other guy's lawyer right on the courthouse steps. So you see what the gun's going to do? Nothing if a guy gets hot enough. So what do? They are courteous to each other. When you walk in that door, you say, yes, sir, no, sir, hello, officer, how are you? And they talk to you that way. So another key point of this book is how important courtesy is to prevent violence.
Now, are you preaching in the book?
No. No, you just see it.
Okay.
It.
Can you give us an example from a paragraph or two here?
Well, okay. Ted walks into a bar, and he walks past some tough guys who just drinking and
Courtesy is important in a bar.
That's it. They say there's no more courtesy to be found than in a Hell's Angel bar. Going to a Hell's Angel bar, they're all very polite to each other. And that, the same reason that they're polite in courtrooms and they're polite whenever there's a threat of violence. We don't think of it because we're civilized. But if you get rid of that, boom, you're through. And the judge's robe says, I am in authority. I know you don't like my decision. Too bad, I'm sorry, sir. Please show them out, And you don't go up and punch them. Shows you what happens when there's no robe. They'll kill that guy if they see him. And we think, oh, that's overdone. It's not overdone if you really mean what you say when you go in there. If you're really unhappy about your kids going with your ex-wife, you'll kill. People will read the papers. So that's another very important thing in American Hearts is courtesy, how important it is to be courteous to each other. And one of the problems of America today is we're not courteous. We don't step on someone's foot and we just keep walking. Certainly the younger generation does that. They don't think it's important to say, excuse me, I'm sorry. They don't do that. Why?
Let me make a courtesy announcement if you've just joined us. We're talking with Ed Vogt, whose new book, American Hearts, a particularly American love story, we're reviewing today, and we're discovering politeness that maybe has escaped a lot of us. So let's hear some more. Give us an example.
Well, he walks into a bar, Ted walks into a bar, and he's hungover. Because, he drinks way too much now since his wife is dead and he's all alone. And he walks past some tough guys and he walks to the end of the bar, and who's running the bar? She's actually fronting it for a whorehouse. Her name is May. Great big burly woman, maybe 40 years old, and a tattoo that says May is love on her shoulder. And she says, what do you want? And he says, whiskey neat. And she says, what do you mean there's no ice? And he says, of course, that's what ice means. No ice means. And she said, all right, she pours them, charges them $6. They get in kind of an annoyance going between the two of them. So she calls the bouncer, Charlie, who's a great big burly guy that he walked past at the beginning, walking into the bar. And she says, Charlie. He says, what's the matter here, May? She says, troublemaker, Charlie. He won't get out. And he turns to Ted, who's a decent athlete. He used to be a pitcher, I guess, in baseball. And he turns to Ted and he says, May don't like you. Charlie don't like you. Out. So Ted's hung over, and he's not in any mood to talk to people and be nice and polite. No. He says, Charlie, you're going to have to quit reading those Tarzan comics. It's affecting your grammar. And he says, okay, we can settle it in here. And he swings on Ted, and there's a big bar fight. Got to have a bar fight. And a cop chase.
And an explosion. Have you got any explosions?
No explosions.
Okay.
That's why it won't be a good movie. Herb Cain thought it was going to be a great movie.
I was going to ask you, I'm seeing some scenes as you described them. Have you thought about turning this into a film of some sort?
I did. Herb Cain said, and it says on...
The Herb Cain?
The Herb Cain, the Pulitzer Prize winner, said, this book, and you can see on the top, and I've got his letter, Xerox, available online at AmericanHeartsLLC.com. You can see his letter saying, hey, it reads great, terrific chase scene and dialogue. Seems to me any movie studio would be interested.
Are there any movie studio producers watching today, perhaps?
Yes, literary agents, movie studio people.
And how would they contact you?
Go to my website, AmericanHeartsLLC.com, and leave a note. I'll get in touch with you.
Okay, tell us a little bit more. You're going to read a paragraph or a sentence or maybe a chapter of 3. Maybe not.
There's some real nice guys. Well, just there's little nuggets. I call them little cherries on the cream pie of the story. Here's a little cherry. He meets a guy named Sergeant York, who's at the Marine recruiter. And Sergeant looks at him, Sergeant York, Kirk asks him.
Kirk is
the student.
Okay.
Kirk and Andrea, the two students, man and woman. And so Kirk goes in to talk to York and his old buddy that he used to know in school. And it says, Sergeant York looked at soberly Kirk because the sergeant has helped a guy in the back room who just came in and fell over. Apparently he's an ex-Vietnam veteran and he's down on his luck. And so he says, that guy you just talked to in the back, is that a guy that you knew from the service? He said, yeah, he served under me in Vietnam, Kirk. And Kirk says, did he lose his arm in the service? Because the guy has only one arm, the guy that came in the bum, so to speak. And it says, Sarge shook his head slowly. He said he didn't lose it, Kirk. He gave it. And you see, hey, now there's a guy that you'd like to know. When there's a Vietnam vet, he's not preaching. He lost his arm. He said, no, I gave it. There's some cute scenes, like Bonnie is a real sweet girl. She's at one of the wild parties that they're throwing, and they're asking a question. They're saying, well, what is heaven? Because it's a special little group that always goes off and tries to think of the religious side of life. And they all ask answer different questions. And it says, Bonnie looked radiant, and she seemed to come out of her shyness, because she's very shy. Well, she said, I think a heaven is a place you go to when you die. She paused, and tears came into her eyes. And all the dogs you have ever known run up to greet you. So that's the kind of sweetness that comes here and there through little scenes.
I bet you have another one.
I do. Andrea, that's Kirk's not a girlfriend, because he doesn't feel romantic toward her, and she doesn't particularly feel romantic toward Kirk.
Sound like wonderful Americans.
They look like a couple to me, right? Andrea looks at her girlfriend in the square, and they see Ted come in, and he sits by himself. Again, loneliness of that guy. And Carolyn says, isn't that Professor Dalton over there? And he says, yeah, he comes in here, out and sits and reads the paper and works a crossword puzzle and goes home. The guy's really lonesome and depressed. So Andrea, who's Kirk's friend, looks at Carolyn and says, well, that's our fault, not his. To be alone, he's a new teacher. I don't think the regular professors think much of him. He's just part-time, and I don't think he's ever taught much. And, of course, he hasn't. And he doesn't kiss up to them. He keeps to himself, I guess. He's not from this area, so he doesn't have any friends. Ted's not in good shape here, So that kind of thing happens. So he once in a while, he's an English major. Once in a while he goes off track as he lectures. And some student talks about what goes on now.
You were an English major, if I recall.
I was an English major. Ted talks to him, and the guy says, hey, you can't talk about the French kings and queens. They're all gone. Not all that courtesy and all that. We don't need that today. And Ted says, gone. So it says, Ted turned away and walked slowly to the windows and looked out. He stared out, almost as if in a trance. Ted kind of goes off once in a while. His voice went softer. Gone, he said. He paused and continued to stare out of the windows. The class is sitting there waiting for him. Isn't there any heaven where old beautiful dances, old beautiful intimacies prolong themselves, he said. The room fell silent. The students looked uncomfortably at each other. Wouldn't you be uncomfortable? What's happening with this guy? So little scenes like that, you see, here's a person who's quite isolated and occasionally goes off of the subject onto things that we don't really know about, and somehow they show the pain he's going through.
You've seen this in classroom, you've experienced it. How did you get to know these people?
I've taken pieces of people I've known, and you put them together. I guess that's what most novelists do. You'll never meet Hamlet. So how did Shakespeare write Hamlet? How did he write that character up? He wasn't the Prince of Denmark, right? So I guess what you say is, you take your life's experience and you create people.
Ed, who is the ideal reader? Who is going to like this? Are we going to find an 18-year-old who is without manners and civility picking this up?
Yeah, and not paying for it and running out. Yeah, that's what I think
who is an ideal reader?
I don't have an ideal reader. I think any American who's a thoughtful American, who likes humor and who likes action, because there's some fights and trouble with the police in particular, because Ted runs into trouble. He speaks his mind. And then with the administration of the college, you'll see what you need in any drama. This is dramatic. Drama is conflict. And that's why these stories about how Howard Hughes made his first air flight are boring movies. Why? It doesn't have any conflict. This book, every page is conflict.
And is it resolved?
Sometimes, yes.
Don't give it away, but
I won't. I won't ever. I won't tell you how it ends.
So are we going to?
I don't know.
Are we going to recognize ourselves and people we know as we read this?
Not specifically, but you'll say, "Geez, I wish I could meet Ted."
Okay.
I knew a guy that had read the book, and I said, "What'd you think of the book?" And he said, "Where's this Andrea girl?" "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'd like to meet her." I said, "Me too."
So you invented her.
I had to create her. Yeah.
Hey, of all of the lovely people you've met over the years, this became Andrea.
She's got some faults. Ted's got faults. Kirk's got faults. But they're human faults. And you say, yeah, I don't like that either, but I could live with that. And Andrea is, in your face about things, and no one pushes her around, but she's not dykey, she's not non-feminine. And that's what we see all of today in America.
It sounds like it has most of the components of an exciting film, if not a great book. Probably both.
Yeah, when it fails, if it fails as a book, it'll make it an absolutely dazzling film, because I've got country western and country rock songs in between certain scenes.
Do you have some sex and violence?
Oh, yes.
Good. That's important,
and
I think.
Tender love scenes like you never read before.
I think it's worth, what is it? Okay, speaking of worth, how does one get a copy?
You go to Amazon.com, Kindle, I guess now is putting it out. Kindle.com, type in American Hearts, and my name is Edward Vogt, V like Victor, O-G-T, and you'll get the novel. It'll look just like this. It's ready to go. You can either send away for it for $14-something.
Not $58.
Not 50. This is 5 hours of reading pleasure. 5 hours
for $14.
You can't buy a cup of coffee for that. $1.50 an hour. It's great.
Would you autograph my copy?
I certainly would. You got $20 on you?
Yeah. So they can go to Amazon. Can they buy it locally?
You can buy it.
Can buy it from you?
You can get in touch with me through my website.
Good.
And I'll throw a copy your way. But you can get it at Amazon. Bingo. Just put your credit card in, and they'll mail you the book. Also, you can read it for free, almost $2.99. You can't get a cup of coffee for $2.99.
How do you do that?
On Kindle.
Ah.
Yeah, it'll say, you want to buy this book? Yeah, okay. Put your card number in, and they'll charge you $2.99, and you can scroll through it and read the whole book. $2.99? Such a deal.
Sounds terrific.
Sydney, such a deal we have.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we have an exciting, true, inspiring, and non-preachy American love story.
It's better than true, Ron. It's fiction.
True fiction.
No, fiction is true. It's better than truth. They have a discussion about this. They have a lot of good discussions in this book because they're college people, right? And Ted says, hey, fiction is better than truth. Fiction brings you into a life, and you don't have to go by what each person says. It can be better than anything you ever knew. Do you know Hamlet? Do you know Madame Bovary?
No.
Do you know the great Pumpernickel?
No.
All right. But you meet these people. You will never meet Ted in real life, I don't think, because he's in this book, and that's only. And you'll never meet Andrea. You can't take her out. You can take the book out, and she's in there. But you cannot take Andrea out. But boy, you'd like to meet her. I'd like to meet her.
Would you like to meet our guest today, Edward Vogt? Ed Vogt, he can be met through his book, American Hearts, and particularly American Love Story. He'll tell you why. You'll work on your manners and your civility after reading this. Is that
we'll
right?
punch you out.
Punch you out in a nice, mannerly way.
Nice. I'll say I'm sorry when I hit you. All right.
Thanks, Ed.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ron. My pleasure.
Okay, great.
All right.